You've done a lot of research on Soundplay in the Hebrew Bible, haven't you? So we have two questions on that note then. So how do the authors of the Hebrew Bible use Soundplay in their communication? And are there any examples that you'd like to highlight in the Psalms that you have in this reader?
Yeah, Soundplay is it's an interesting phenomenon. It's an interesting term too, because it's a misnomer in a way. It's too bad that we don't have a different term that we standardly use, because it kind of reflects how across different cultures sound patterning has functioned in different ways. And there's a book called "The Pun Also Rises" about the history of punning and soundplay throughout cultures, and over time. And the author talks about how in some cultures, punning was a very high art form, and in others, and this tends to be the case in our, at least present day American culture, that punning is kind of a low art form in a way, or it's common to like kids' jokes and things like that. But you don't think of punning as kind of like this highfalutin literary technique necessarily. But that's not always been the case. Punning and sound patterning has worked differently over the ages and across cultures. And so in the Hebrew Bible, there's soundplay all over the place, just use of similar consonants, repeated consonants, similar vowel sounds, all that kind of thing. And naturally that exists in English too. I mean, good literature sounds good. Yeah. And so, of course, I guess what I'm kind of teasing out here is you need to differentiate. There can be different kinds of, soundplay and punning and things like that. But I'm just reflecting on the term soundplay. So anyway, to get to your question though, about, how does soundplay, or paranomasia is the technical term, how does that function in the Hebrew Bible? It functions for it has a lot of purposes. And so, it can be used for just kind of purely aesthetic effect, just for euphony and, making something sound like delightful literature. But as you well know, it can be used for a lot of kind of more, I guess, literary purposes, in the sense of like developing narratives or providing etiologies. So when Isaac is named, it says his name Yitzchak is from the root sachak, to laugh, and so Sarah laughs, sachak, and so it's an etiology for his name. Or like the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11, it says they named it Bavel because their god, Balal, he confused their languages. So there's soundplay there. So a lot of time in the Bible, when you get somebody or a person or a place being named, there can be sound play on that, to kind of almost as if like there's something inherent in the word itself that like reflects the person's destiny or something, which is really interesting. Then you get that elsewhere in the ancient Near East. I'll just give a couple more examples maybe before moving on to the Psalm. Is that some really well-known ones, like in Amos 8, he says, God shows Amos this basket of summer fruit, and the word for summer fruit is kites. and so he says, like, what do you see, Amos? And he says, I see, summer fruit kites. And then God says, well, yeah, and ba ha-kates, the end is coming, so it's like the word end, and it's this, sound play that where basically God is like revealing what he's going to do. It's kind of like divine revelation, which is really interesting, because it's not some like little joke or something. I mean, far from it, it's quite the opposite. Yeah. But it's really interesting that that's like couched in, with that kind of twist of the sound. And in Jeremiah as well, Jeremiah 1:11, where, he says, I see the branch of an almond tree, shakade, and he says, I am watching over, God says, I am watching over shokade. It's the same concept, it's just like different vowel, my plans, to accomplish them. So those two instances in Amos and Jeremiah, I think, are significant, because God is basically, he's kind of like revealing his will by means of sound play. So I think those show that, there's all sorts of ways that sound play is used. It can be kind of, in small ways and big ways in the Bible. Just a couple, if we have time, I'll just give a couple of reflections on sound play in the Psalter. Interestingly, the Psalm 1 of, beginning of the Psalter begins with sound play. So Ashrei Ha'ish Asher, Lo Halach, etc. So like, blessed is the person who, that is, a lot of repetition of sounds. It's similar, interestingly, to like Genesis 1:1, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz. So Bereshit bara, it's like the first two words in the Bible. their the beginning, it's like the same three consonants. So that's interesting that like Psalms begin that way too. And like Psalm 23. So the lo, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, gam ki elech b'gei salmavet lo ira ra. There's Soundplay there. I will not fear evil. You can think that's a very intimate scene, between the speaker and God. It's very intense, the valley of the shadow of death.
Mm-hmm.
That text is, so meaningful and to so many people, and yet there's Soundplay right there. So again, it's not like this frivolous thing. It's just like it contributes to the beauty of it, and it's a way to kind of almost like process emotion, or just kind of think through one's relationship with God or realities. And I'll just mention a couple more examples, then we can move on. Is that like Psalm 88 is a very dark psalm. It's the speaker feels abandoned by God and by all of his or her friends, and it's just like it's very kind of dismal picture, and yet there's Soundplay there too. The person says like, I've been wasting away since my youth, for example, and there's Soundplay there, and in other places in the psalm. One more example, and this is not in the Psalter, but Lamentations is so interesting because it's just full of all kinds of wordplay and Soundplay. Again, those are misnomers because it's not play. Most of the chapters of Lamentations are structured as acrostics, which again, in our culture, acrostics, as parents, we're used to seeing them in maybe kids' books, but it's not the kind of thing that's like high literature generally in our culture. And yet Lamentations is about serious trauma. And yet the acrostics and all this other type of Soundplay and wordplay was seen as a worthy vehicle for working through those emotions and experiences. And, one could say a number of things about that. Maybe it's providing a kind of structure for people to work through difficult experiences. The acrostic, because it's kind of, it's like things are so out of control that we're trying to, create some way to kind of process it. That's one possibility. But yeah, you could even, it's just interesting that even when you're giving voice to, or when the biblical authors are giving voice to very intense emotions, they'll use this kind of intensive literary artistry as well, which is just really interesting to reflect on.
What a great pitch for people to engage with Hebrew and keep at it with Hebrew, right?
Exactly.
This is the kind of stuff that almost 100% of the time you're not going to pick up on translation, because it's almost impossible to pick this stuff up. Absolutely fascinating.